Oh, how I enjoy listening to the Dealer Playbook podcast. Episode 13 featuring the man himself, Mr. Cory Mosley. Here we go.
You're dialed in to the Dealer Playbook podcast, where it's all about winning auto dealer strategies that deliver proven results. And now your hosts, Robert Weissman and Michael Cirillo.
All right, everybody, what is going on? Michael Cirillo and Robert Weissman here with the Dealer Playbook. Robert, what's going on, brother?
Michael, glad to be here, man. How's everything going?
Good. So, and it's like, you know, you make it sound like we don't talk to each other very often, but I'll tell you what, people, we Robert and I talk to each other 5 million times a day, and even more when we're doing these podcasts, because we look forward to doing them so much and just feel so fortunate because we get to interview the who's who in the industry. Today's no exception. We have Cory Mosley from Mosley Automotive. You can check him out online, CoryMosley.com or MosleyAutomotive.com. He's a speaker, an author, a presenter, a thought leader. The information that you will hear in today's episode is going to be mind-blowing because he talks about something. I'll admit that at first, when Robert, when you pitched the title and the concept to me, I was a little bit hesitant, and I think you were too. Why was that?
Well, because the title of this is, you know, he had an idea of talking about how the back to the basics strategies and mindset and just that kind of approach, you know, it's right. You need to get back. It's time to get back to the basics. Isn't the path to sales growth? And I got you where you were coming from on there, and then, you know, in our pre-show, and then actually through the podcast you'll hear where Cory, it's a little bit more than that, and it's very interesting. He's a great speaker and has just a, you know, so knowledgeable of this business.
I'll tell you what, let me just fill everybody in. Here's where I was coming from. So we hear a lot in the industry, I'll agree with Cory, back to basics. I mean, you'll agree, hey, let's get back to the basics. Well, I'm kind of a basics thinker. I'm thinking like, you know what? There's so many things that we know we should be doing in the industry. Something simple like pounding the phones, or, you know, working on our ability to schedule appointments over the phone. Things that we know we should be doing that are quote unquote the basics, but that we're not doing. So I'm always like, you know, before you can advance and conquer, you need to be looking at the basics. Well, Cory, I have to say, has expanded my vision. He's expanded my understanding. He talks about how going back to basics really is a sales killer. And so you're going to hear him talk about it here, explain his point. By the end of it, I'm pretty sure you're going to come around to the same way of thinking that I had, and learn new things that you can be doing right now, starting today, to dominate your market, dominate your business, expand and conquer.
Make sure that you stick around till near the tail end of the conversation with Cory for your chance to get a free copy of his newest book, The Way I See It, by Cory Mosley. Let's do it. And just like that, everybody, we are here. It is the Dealer Playbook. And as we said in the intro, we are here with a good friend and somebody I look up to and love. Hearing him speak and listening to it and consuming his content is Cory Mosley from MosleyAutomotive.com. That's a great hit. His company's website. Definitely check it out. Cory, thanks a million for being here, man.
Oh, my pleasure, guys.
Awesome. And we just hooked up. I met you. I think we met in person the first time was definitely at one of Sean's Internet Sales 20 groups, and you got the first chance to meet Michael at the previous one in Atlantic City. We were talking, and we were able to put this together. So Cory's here today, guys, to talk about an interesting topic about how back to the basics thinking and strategies is not the way, the path to sales growth. And initially, before even the pre-show, when we were talking, my initial reaction to that was, so you mean to tell me that something as basic as more phone activity, just dialing more numbers by a representative is not the path to sales growth? So is that what? So Cory, what exactly, when you're talking about back to the basics, what kind of back to the basic thinking, do you mean directly?
Well, at the end of the day, here's the thing that's funny about our business. And Robert, I know from you being at a bunch of sessions of mine, I tell a story about the monkeys and kind of how the origin of monkey see, monkey do came about. And the nature of our business is we have these things that just roll off our tongue. It's no different than the word tracks. It's no different than, if I could you, would you, and what would it take to earn your business, kind of the stuff that if you spend any time on the retail side of the business, like in a store, we all should have learned or came across at one point in time. So this idea of basics being the answer, and I hear this often when I talk to people or dealers, and really, Cory, what we just got to do is just get back to basics and get back to basics and basics. But the reality is, things that we're doing by taking the approach of just getting back to basics actually create more challenges because we never see any type of competitive advantage. People like to talk about the idea of crushing the competition and doing all of these things. And I don't know how that crushing of the competition happens, or really the separation, as I like to talk about, really takes place when we're just focused on kind of this idea of getting back to basics, and that's going to solve our problems. If, we got to get back to 100% TO, or we got to, pound those phones. I ask any general manager in the country, hey, what do you want, from your sales team? Oh, I want to sell more cars. But we never define that. We never deep dive that. Most people don't sit around in a meeting and say, what can we do to get ahead? And when you use terminology like getting back to basics, that kind of keeps you in this cage that doesn't have you thinking forward, but thinking about what we can go back to do in the past. And, last time I checked, history is to be learned from. So a lot of cases, it's not always ideal to be repeated.
Okay. I gotcha. So you made a comment. I saw you. It was a quote too from somebody. And I apologize, I forget who you were quoting, but you were saying that, thinking that doing what got you, here is going to get you there. Am I right? Something along those lines.
Marshall Goldsmith, who has written several books. One of his titles of his book is "What Got You Here Won't Get You There." And again, in its simplicity of statement, it's basically saying some of the things that we used to do aren't effective anymore. And I've talked about this for years, the law of diminishing returns, as a universal law, which from an automotive standpoint boils down to say, if we continue to do the same things over and over again, sooner or later they use their effect or lose their effect. And, the best kind of way I caption it is, if the majority of buyers in your store are not first-time buyers, then chances are they've seen this movie before.
Yeah, good one. So what kind of things should, when they're going into that meeting and they're talking about the growth, growing the sales, and the back to the basics, even just saying that term, it brings nothing to the table. What's going to bring it to the table? What should they be doing?
Well, think about it from an innovative standpoint. One of the greatest fears that we have in our industry that is very, very common is the who else is doing it mentality. You go in, you have a good idea, and you may talk to a dealer about it or present it, and someone will go, well, what other dealers are you working with? Who else is doing it? See, there's this principle that is not often taught in our industry, but is taught in every major business school, and it's the principle called FMA, which is first mover advantage. And first mover advantage talks about the ability to gain market share and control market share by being first. And it's counterproductive in our industry because we're an industry that doesn't always like to be first. And we think about that. I would say 10 years ago when email marketing came on the scene, and we were one of the first companies that was involved with distributing an email marketing program, which today is known as Auto Revenue, which is owned by Dominion now. But we were one of the first people that had the opportunity to be involved with that through some reselling and some targeting. And it was amazing to talk to dealers where you're talking about things like email marketing through the database and getting opt-ins and building your database and marketing and remarketing. 10 years ago at that time, it was very foreign. Nobody wanted to be first. Everyone wanted to know who else was doing it, who else was doing it. And then, of course, comes the market saturation. So my challenge to everybody ultimately is to look at first mover advantage and look at ways that you can go first to market. And Robert, you certainly can appreciate this more than anybody. 2015 models are coming out. So what are we doing about it? You're a big advocate of video. As those cars are hitting Are these stores first to the market with getting their video content out? Are they first to market with starting to educate the consumers? And we're on a podcast right now that, you know, people across our industry are listening to. Where was that 10 years ago? So if if we were just saying, let's get back to basics, let's, you know, get our product knowledge strong, and that's important, but let's just get that. But how are we disseminating the information? So how can we be first? Where are the areas that we can move first with new product, move first with things that we're not saying? The one thing I know about the internet is everything that we could possibly want to do or want to know is available to us through content that's available. And again, I'm talking to a group of people here who are trying to be ahead of the curve and stay ahead of that curve. So when I talk about first movers advantage, and I talk about not simply having a back to basics mentality, it's how do we study where are we going? What are other things going on outside of our industry in terms of consumer behavior? We're still learning about things like heat mapping and understanding where our people go, which have been around for years and studied in years or 4 years in other industries. We don't record our salespeople doing sales pitches like the IBMs and the Xeroxes and the major corporations do so they can learn and get critiqued and get better. We don't do that kind of stuff on a grand scale. So the reason why we hear about this dealer or that dealer is because out of the 21,672 dealers, there's only a small percentage of them doing anything innovative. So, you know, you don't get anything by sitting still except left behind.
So we're really talking about, you know, by now, you should already know the basics. You need to be moving on to more progressive thinking. Like the concept of going back to basics, if you don't even know what the basics are, isn't going to help you. You should already know how to do those things, the pounding of the phones, the sales pitches, the word tracks, but you should be looking for ways to add to that or enhance what you're doing to kind of, like you said, dominate the market. But how? How are you going to dominate the market with basics? Is essentially what you're saying.
Correct. So, you know, for example, when we built Mosley 24/7, which is our on-demand portal, I said when I went in to do the content and we started to write the content, I said, I'm not going to start with how to do a handshake and how to greet somebody and, you know, don't have smoke on your breath when you're talking to customers. I mean, that's just kind of things that people should know. We should be beyond that at this particular point. So I want it from a content level and I want it from a messaging level. I want everybody to start to look at what we're not doing. When you get all your managers in a room and you start making decisions on strategy, well, how does that differ if all of you come from the same school of thought? Well, we need to invite other schools of thought to the table. Adding new skill, you know, you can market yourself to death, but adding new skills and your salespeople adding new skills, which means they're adding skills that they have not been had before, does several things. One, it effectively assists with your new hire process in terms of retention. I don't need to tell anybody on this call about the turnover rate in our industry. Number two, it takes underperformers that we normally would just dismiss and say, oh, you know what, they can't make it. We gave them 2 months. They're off their training salary. They can't hit their numbers. Get out. It gives them an opportunity to learn some things that will be more effective for today's customer. And then the third person is every store has salespeople who may be effective but have plateaued. So they're hitting the same number every month, no matter what, which could be good if the number's high enough, but chances are they're missing out on units. So adding new skill and not just taking a back to basics approach is our way, in my opinion, the way forward.
So let me ask you this, Cory. Do you feel like because, and I'm just going to say it this way, maybe lack of better words, but do you feel like because the standard is so low that the basics are viewed as progressive solutions? I mean, it's like, in your career and in our careers, we observe so many dealerships who aren't doing the basics. Do you feel like we've kind of set the bar too low because now it's like, hey, well, look at the dealership who's making 75 or 100 phone calls a day. Look at all the deals they're getting because they're making these phone calls, and making the phone calls is such a basic thing that becomes, almost in the view of the dealers that basic thing becomes a progressive thing. Do you know what I mean?
And Cory, I've heard you say yourself that, especially when he's saying with the basics. In some markets, though, you can get away with the just good enough, you know what I mean, or just the basics because of the competition levels.
Exactly. Which, by the way, that word combination, just so we're all clear, I think needs to be removed from the English language. Good enough. I totally despise it.
Sure. Well, and there's a couple, there's a couple different drivers to it. Number one, let's not get away from the fact of what we do as an industry or what a dealership represents. So you have the full power of the manufacturer and their brand recognition. So if I've got the right store in the right marketplace, there's a lot of things that are going to happen just because. I say this to salespeople all the time, and some of them kind of smirk at me and look at me sideways, but it's easy to sell cars to a group of people who are buying anyway. So the reality of it is, so, I've got a lease coming up. So, if my lease is up June 31st, guess what? Unless I'm going to give up driving or my needs about driving change, I'm going to have to buy something. So the day I left the, retail side of the business, I turned in the keys to my demo on a Friday, and I walked into a dealership Saturday morning with a need to buy a car. So everything beyond.
Question: How close are you to your lease being up? No, seriously. Like, I'm not trying to. I don't sell cars anymore. But like, how far out have you been contacted? Has your salesperson started selling you yet?
Well, I'm a little bit of an anomaly only because I actively switch out of my cars way before any of my leases or any of that stuff's up. So I'm a bit of an anomaly. But I will tell you though, I'm based in Richmond, Virginia now. So as I've been car shopping, I've replaced about 2 cars since I've lived here, and I don't go in as, Cory Mosley, blah, blah, blah.
You go in, like you said, like Heathcliff Huxtable on that episode of The Cosby Show, don't you?
Yeah, I don't. Yeah. Listen, I still wear what's in my closet, but I go in and observe it, and I can just tell you from recent experiences, I'm flipping out of 2 cars right now. I'm in the process of literally waiting for a car to come in right now, and I can tell you that going to a couple of those dealerships, I have a dealership that still hasn't followed up with me once since I left the dealership. So, and that salesperson happened to be new. So what that tells me is there's definitely a breakdown in that dealership's training process about follow-up. A, doing it, which we could say is a basic principle, but B, how to do it. So there's clearly a breakdown, but they've got a multi-million-dollar facility that's brand new that they just put up, and it looks beautiful, but there's some basic things in the back to basics scenario that they're not doing to even talk about getting advanced.
So really, it's almost like, you mentioned earlier, there's so many other industries that are applying extremely effective principles in their marketing and in the way they do business that we haven't adopted yet. And really, in so doing, I guess the culture right now is that we're backtracking as an industry. We're saying back to basics. When again, there's these things that you should already know how to do that you should be doing. There's breakdowns in training, there's breakdowns in process, but it's like, you know what? Let's buckle up here. Let's get these things done so that we can advance and conquer.
Well, and here's the other thing. I want to point out, because it's easy to talk about what everybody's doing wrong. I'm immensely sympathetic to dealer principals and executive managers because they have a million different things getting thrown at them. I don't think there's an actual dealer in the country that I could talk to that would say, Cory, I have no interest in being better. I have no interest in being efficient. I have no interest in having a great team. But obviously They have the manufacturer coming at them. They got bills. They're small businesses. We forget that. But they're small businesses as well. So I'm amazed. I'm sympathetic to that. But here's the issue. The next layer below them are the people that sit in the largest gap of opportunity. So we talk about the salespeople or a BDC or the internet manager. We talk about them as the entry point to the customer. But in that influence pyramid is that management team that sits in between the dealer principal who's got to run a business and got 20 other things going on or people pulling at him, and the core managers that are responsible for that. And I got to tell you, when we think about it from a management standpoint, this is one of the only industries, and I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on this, but this is one of the only industries that I know of where once you get anointed manager, you get to go be a manager everywhere that you go without any real ongoing training and then then a lot of them, not all of them, because I know some great managers, but then they take on this attitude that, oh, I'm a manager now, so anything that you've got to say, direct that to the salespeople. And I'll tell you a real quick story, and I'd love to hear your feedback, because I know that you know exactly what I'm talking about. But we finished a 3.5-month program out in Arizona with a very well-known dealership, and 3.5-month program, reworking word tracks, the whole deal. And managers always too busy to show up for training. And as we're leaving the store, we undid all the if I could you would yous and come on downs, and really worked hard to do that. Got grosses up, I think $315 a copy. Closing percentage was up. So really worked hard and did a good job with it, in my opinion at least. But as we're leaving, there's a new hire that's in the sales office. And I always remember, this was a few years ago, but I always remember it. And as I was saying goodbye and thanking the sales manager, this was our last visit to the store, thanking him, saying goodbye, I walked in as he was doing a quote unquote training session. And he ended the training session by telling the salesperson, he was coaching him about a phone call, hey, if all else fails, just do what I do. Tell him to come on down. And I just put my head down, shook it, and walked out. But that's what we're fighting. That's why I'm in business. That's why the several names that we all know are in business, because that opportunity exists every day. And even people who train, even people who say they train all the time, or, oh, Cory, we have sales meetings every day. We train every day. The problem sometimes with the information age is the age of the information. What are you training on? Are you just trying to hammer down the tactics from 1980? Or are we talking about progressive strategies? Because rehashing great news as a delivery, or banks require 1/3 down, and all these things, rehashing that stuff over and over again, to me, is just not the path to sales growth.
Yeah. And that's for, all that, any sales manager, anybody in management listening, that's at least your way to sales growth personally for you financially, is to, be online, is to try to unlock new strategies, tactics, etc. and review them with your team, take some responsibility with them, and try to keep them in with the latest and the greatest. That's only going to affect your career and enhance your career and your life, period.
Robert, we all know Steve Jobs, right? We know Steve Jobs, of course, right? He had a great saying I use all the time. He said, you can't mandate productivity. It's an organization's responsibility to equip its sales team with the tools they need to be successful. You can't call a meeting and say, you're not making enough calls, you guys aren't selling enough cars, you suck, we need to get better, somebody's getting fired if there's not 20 people in the store this weekend, and then leave the meeting. Go ahead, Michael. Sorry.
No, that's good. This is all in line. So I was going to ask you, okay, let's talk specifically to managers right now. You mentioned something that, kind of made me chuckle. You used the word anointed manager, and then proceeded to talk about, this cycle of management that these guys get into, where they just kind of take a step back and maybe a little bit get disconnected from their crew, or, as you say it, the largest gap of opportunity. For managers listening in right now, where do they start? How do they break this change so that they can move forward in a culture and an environment inside the dealership that is progressive and not backtracking?
They start by getting the information and not just making the assumption that it's only relevant to the salespeople. They have to become the student just like everyone else. So how can you be an effective leader if you're not exposed to the information? How can your guys go to workshops that you don't go to? Or worse yet, the most pressing thing that I hear, or that really is just really tragic to me, is that the end user. So is that there's one person, or usually one person, that stands in the way of the end user getting the information. So you think about training. You think about, we talked about meeting at these workshops. These workshops should have 9,000 people in them, not 150. There should be hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people, because if we collectively looked at who needed this information, that number is in the thousands. However, because it boils down to one person getting it, quote unquote, and making the decision. So there's one guy in a store, or girl in a store right now, who is presented with an opportunity to do training or to get education for their team, and they're going, oh, I don't think we need that. And then now the 15 people, the 20 people, the 30 people that they lead now suffers the consequences of that decision. So my message to managers is, number one, we all have opportunities for growth. If we were on video here, I'll put my library against anybody's library in the industry. And no, I haven't read all the books. There are resources, there are references, and I'm constantly learning and growing information so that I can process it, apply it in my business, and then make it available to the industry that has provided for me for 16 years and give it back. So I don't take credit for creating it all, but I can tell you what, I'm curating it as best I can to make it valuable. So as a manager, I want to be why not be the first person to get that information? How can we have arrived at the destination already when our business is evolving? So how can I be a manager 10 years or 15 years or 20 years in the business and say I've arrived at the destination already, when every single day the people who are 10 times smarter than us are out there creating algorithms and studying consumer behavior and giving us new cues and information to help us be more effective? How can I just turn that switch off and hold my Sharpie in my hand and say, let's work a deal?
I mean, that's the
Well, and you know what? I'll say this. I think one of the most attractive things about the automotive industry for me is that, I think we'd all agree at its core, it is an industry that thrives on self-mastery and on progression. And right now, it's just a matter of making sure that that message is resurfaced and penetrates more people in the industry. Like you said, these workshops shouldn't have 150 people at them. They should have 1,000, 2,000, 10,000. And I think for me, it makes sense that the first thing that people need to do in getting the information is they also have to gauge their commitment level and how much they actually want to be a part of something that's as big as it is. And I think that builds the stage, that willingness, that desire to acquire the information and to do something with it is what will really set people apart. And I think in so doing, maybe might sound basic, but is actually one of the most progressive things that people can do is always have the desire to learn more and to be added upon. What do you think?
And the only challenge that I'll say to that idea of self-mastery is, I disagree to the point that the numbers don't support the theory that it may reward self-mastery, but that we're committed to it, because real estate agents, they're self-mastery people. MLM marketers, they're self-mastery people. The people that are paying to go to the events and getting the information are self-mastery people. If you look at a workshop and you look at the typical workshops that we all know of, that we participate in and we go to, and you polled every person that was sitting there and saying, did you pay for yourself? Most of them, the large majority of them, are going to tell them no. And then when asked, would you have come if you had to pay for yourself? That's the answer that I want to know. So that's the kind of, we don't think the same way as an industry that a real estate agent does, who works under the blanket of a franchise idea or a franchise system or organized system like automotive dealers do, or an MLM or what have you. So we don't think about it the same way. We think about it as if the dealer is gonna pay, then I'll go. If the dealer's gonna educate me, then maybe I'm open to being educated. And again,
very good. So that's a question that everyone listening in should ask. Would I be willing to pay to enhance my knowledge and enhance my ability, or am I just simply waiting for my dealership to pay for me?
I agree, because then, and if your answer is I'm just going to sit around and wait, then you'll ride the wave of success or lack thereof that the dealership potentially rides. So,
and you should probably go find something that you're actually passionate about.
And it's a monotonous job. So let's not make the mistake. And only people that have done it can appreciate it. It's certainly a monotonous job, and there's things that we need to do to certainly try to keep it fresh and stay relevant. And there's no more fun that you can have. I mean, there's a lot of great times and a lot of great things going on in our industry. And and certainly I don't begin a workshop or a seminar without addressing mindset and addressing that, because all the word tracks and discussion about how-tos and execution in the world, certainly if we're not in from a mindset, if you're waiting for the call back, you're on the list to go to work at the post office, which is a great institution, but if you're on that list, because it's like 2 years long to get a job there. So if you're like, hey, I'll sell cars in the meantime, or, home mortgages business, that was a huge thing, right? When mortgages were hot, you saw a ton of people leave the business to go do that. And then when that went off a cliff, you saw those same people coming back into the business. So nothing wrong with that in the grand scheme of things. We got to support our families. But when you talk about, are you in the business for the long haul or not, that's a huge key. And I think it's clear. I mean, even Robert, when we talk offline and kind of at conferences and stuff, when we start going, I don't think there's anybody that questions, do I believe what I'm talking about right now? Just the whole execution of how we're having this conversation. So can you speak that passionately? I talk about it as, are you drinking your own Kool-Aid at the store?
That's it. I mean, you gotta get tuned in and just, fall in love with it, and then it doesn't seem like work, and you'll want to. I mean, that's what happened with me. I wanted to go. I can't tell you how much I've invested on my education. I had no help with, but I did it, and I still do. And I'll never stop, and that's what professionals do. You're right. There's like, as a real estate agent, you're required to have X amount of hours of education, monthly or quarterly, yearly, whatever. In automotive, there's it's which seems like almost a more complicated purchase, right? Is still there's no manufacturer's mandated, except OEM factory certifications.
Get certified.
Like, you could still deliver a vehicle without that,
right? Of course. Yeah. D is for drive. Have a nice day, Mr. Customer. Don't forget me on the survey.
There you go, Michael.
Yeah. I'm sorry, man. I'm sitting here taking notes because, I think, what this sounds like? This sounds like the beginning of a movement and something that should be picking up steam a lot faster. So, and I'm on board with everything you're saying, Cory. Robert mentioned, coming into this, we were like, okay, where's he going to go with this? But it totally makes sense. You should already understand the basics. You should already have implemented the basics. You need to be thinking about how to advance and conquer, how to be more progressive, how to do the things that your competitors actually aren't doing or are willing to do. I mean, if everyone's talking about going back to the basics, then there's no way for you to differentiate yourself. There's no way to set yourself apart and be unique. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, here's a challenge. Next time you're at the airport and going to pick up a rental car, just look at the back ends of all the cars and tell me if you can tell them all apart without their badging. So the cars are equalizing in terms of what the options are. We're equalizing in terms of tech in the vehicles. There's more places to spend $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 than ever before. There's 70% of the, we love to make up statistics, right? But 70% of the dealers are under construction right now. I mean, go down your motor miles. Everybody's under construction or getting ready to go under construction. So we've started changing doorknobs. We're all serving Starbucks coffee now in the dealerships. Where is the separation coming from? So if you're a Honda dealer, because they were one of the first to make everybody start to make changes, and I shopped at 3-4 Honda dealers in the area, you all have the same showroom, basically. You have the same cars, of course, but now Hyundai's in the mix, Kia's in the mix. It's just a big competitive landscape. This was probably the most, for me personally, this is probably one of the most tough decision-making processes for my own personal purchases that I've had in years, because there's so many things to look at. So you have to ask yourself, as a salesperson or a manager or an owner, how are we winning? How are we handling separation? How are we delivering on a customer experience? And how are we doing it, better than the next person?
Cory, thank you so much for being with us today. Just a wealth of information. I don't think anybody listening in feels like they were shortchanged on this. Tons of value.
Pick up his book, The Way I See It, by Cory Mosley.
Yeah, absolutely.
On Amazon. Yeah, where's that at?
That's right. Well, obviously, you can pick it up on Amazon. It's a little cheaper on Amazon, but
no doubt.
If you're interested, you're so funny. If you're interested in getting it signed at all, then buy it from our website. I sign every copy.
We will link them all into the show notes at the bottom. And I don't know how in the world, I'm just now looking through mine, I don't even have a signed copy of this book. I mean, that's unbelievable, man.
I think because you did a smash and grab.
Well, yeah, no. Charles,
with your buddy
shout out to Charles Cannon, bought me this book for me, man. I didn't have any cash. I had the old classic, no cash on me.
That's right. That sounds like you.
I'll get you next time.
And why don't we do this? Why don't we do this for the people checking out this episode? Go to www.thedealerplaybook.com. We'll give you a signed copy of Cory's book. We'll take care of that, Cory. We'll order about 5 books. So the first 5 people to comment with their feedback and questions, www.thedealerplaybook.com. We'll hook you up with a signed copy of Cory Mosley's book. How else can people get a hold of you?
Awesome. Obviously we try to be as all over the place as possible, but mosleyautomotive.com, as Robert mentioned at the beginning. I'm on Twitter at Cory Mosley. We keep it simple. Facebook, Mosley Automotive. And if you're not getting our weekly video series, Working Yourself Wednesdays, we want to have a responsibility to get good content. That's what, we're celebrating 10 years in business, this actual May. So that's been a commitment I've had since day one. I want to get the information to people who want it and can make it usable. And I think Jim Rome said it best. He said he wants to share information with people who care.
It's a great way to put it.
Thank you, Sim. Oh, also check out what is it? Mosley247.com. It's his 24 hours a day, 7 days a week virtual training platform. I was sniffing around it a little bit today. Because I'm a professional journalist, and I wanted to get through some research. So, and I thought it was great, man. That's one of the best kept secret out there. So check that out if you guys get a chance to. And again, we'll link to that at thedealerplaybook.com in the show notes. Cory, we'll let you get back to it, man. Thanks so much for giving us the time today, man.
I appreciate you guys for having me. Have a good one.
No doubt. Later.
Thank you. Take care.
And there we have it, everybody. Cory, #MoneybagsMosley, giving his, his take and, just flexing some of his knowledge and his approach to a lot of things. I mean, the guy's definitely a thought leader, great speaker, delivery is always on point. Michael, what'd you think?
Yeah, like I said, I came into this interview a little bit hesitant, but he definitely shaped the vision and the understanding. I think
hesitant because you're not.
No. I mean, hesitant
in his capabilities.
No, absolutely not.
The mess. I got what you're saying.
Yeah, just hesitant in that. I think as an industry, we need to be focusing on the things that we should be doing already. But as you heard in the episode, it's like, but you should already be doing these things. That's why they're the basics. So don't go back to the things that you should have already been doing. You should already be doing them, period. Now move on, advance and conquer. So, I exceeded my expectations. I shouldn't say it that way, but you know what I'm going for. He, incredible speaker. He brought it home, some valuable nuggets that I think everyone can apply to their individual store, their small business dealership, however you want to look at it, to advance and conquer.
Exactly. And dealers, I know it sometimes feels like, and Cory brought it up where we're always talking about what people are doing wrong, what we're doing wrong in this industry. And it's not really that. It's like I was in the dealership for a long time, and I was the guy that was digging up the new things to do, the next wave, the creative, outside the box. And I would really bring them to my dealer. The reason why I ended up really going like hard balls to the wall myself solo is because I was bringing them to my management and even to the dealer to try to implement and take action on for the store, and they would get overlooked and they never wanted to put them in action. So poke your people, because there could be that guy on there that's dialed in, big time and to advanced strategies that outside of automotive that are really, really converting. So you can be that first one to at scale for that particular platform or strategy, what have you.
Yeah, absolutely. So check this out. You mentioned earlier in the pre-show, we are going to be giving away several copies of Cory's book, The Way I See It. So the way to get your hands
signed by the
author, absolutely. The way you're going to get your hands on that is by visiting the dealerplaybook.com. Check out the show notes for this episode. Leave us a comment. Leave us a question for Cory. We're going to read every single one of them. The first few people, we'll say the first 5 people to comment on the show notes, will get a free signed copy of the book. We'll send that out to you. So
good way to get started on education on looking for new strategies.
Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and until next time, thank you so much for stopping by and listening in. I'm Michael Cirillo with Robert Wiseman. This is the Dealer Playbook. Catch you later.
Out of here.